I am excited to introduce you to our next speaker, Daniel Tuutau. Welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Daniel, his name is actually part Tongan. And so, Daniel, how do you actually say, if you were an islander, how do you actually say your last name?
So you would normally pronounce my name Daniel, if it was in Tongan, would actually be Daniela Tuutau. But
Oh,
um but most white people, I just go Tuutau because there's a lot of vowels in that
yeah.
last name.
Lots of U's. Yeah, I understand. So Daniel is from Los Angeles, California, and he actually graduated from the University of California in Santa Barbara with a degree in music. He has BA, a Bachelor's of Arts, and an MM. And then later on, he got his doctorate of musical arts from the University of Utah. So we are grateful to welcome you, Dr. Tuatau. I won't even try the way you said it because I might butcher it. So Dr. Tuatau loves to sing, perform, and he's incredibly talented. You'll find him at the local opera house. He sings all over, and maybe he can share with you a few of the places you might find his performances.
So before the pandemic started, I was frequent with Utah Opera, singing both in their opera chorus and occasionally some small compromario roles. I also am singing frequently with the Lyrical Opera Theater, which is a local opera company here in Utah, mainly in Murray. They're moving to West Valley, which are a couple cities, suburbs, outlying areas of the Salt Lake City region of Utah.
That is amazing. Without further ado, Daniel, we're excited to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks, Malia. So I'm grateful for the chance to be here and share a few thoughts about music and music's role in storytelling. Um, we uh, we have a lot of opportunities to share different stories, and music has a way of touching us, touching our souls, sort of helping us sort of connect on a different level. Now, as a singer myself, I'm a little bit biased towards vocal music, but an important element about vocal music is that it's a combination of words and music that you don't find in other types of music. So instrumental or orchestral, solo music, uh, that is all has a way of moving us, right? Sort of speaking to the soul. When we have vocal music that has words that combine with those two, you're able to dive in even more so. That's a little bit biased. I'm sure if you got a violinist on here or maybe a trumpeter, right, they might have a different opinion about that. But as a singer, it has that unique element that lets us tell a story sort of on multiple levels at the same time. Now, today I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the roles in storytelling through music, specifically vocal music. And to do so, I have a few slides I was going to share here as we go through. And so to start off, I want to talk about sort of four separate roles that I've sort of created to help us kind of understand the different parts that come together in the storytelling process. And the reason I'm breaking this up is because as storytellers yourself, right? Maybe you don't fit one of these categories, um, but maybe you might fit into a different category, right? So maybe you're not a singer per se or a composer, but there might be other ways that you can still use music and use singing as a way of telling those stories. And so the four roles, we're going to sort of start off with the first role, which is sort of where I think that true like the best vocal music really starts is in the words. And my very first voice teacher, when I was an undergraduate student at UC Santa Barbara, I found out that he had actually gotten into the music world not from singing. He got into the music world through the poetry. And so he was actually a literature major as an undergrad, and he loved this poetry. He actually got into like German poetry, and it's a tangent, but there's a whole genre called Lieder, which is German art song, very popular through the Romantic period. Composers such as Schubert and Schumann, Brahms wrote a lot of this art song. Anyways, my teacher had gotten into the poetry, into the works of Goethe and a lot of those other, romantic poets, and then found from that there was actually music that had kind of branched out of that was joined together. And so the words and the writings are really important because of the story that they tell of themselves. Now, the second role is the role of the composer. And the composer is the person that takes the words and sets them to music and sort of adds that extra layer to sort of touch the soul in a way that the words alone can't do. And so that combination of the two is where that is created. Now, the third role in performing of this that I consider is that of the director, who's like who will interpret the performance. And so most of my career has been in opera, in classical singing and in art song. And whenever you do an opera, you'll have a director, a coach, those types of individuals that sort of help you interpret what the music and the words and how they combine, and sort of help create that image to then go to the last role, which I was going to talk about, which is the performer, the singer themselves. And the singer takes all those elements and then presents it to the audience. Now, the thing about each of these roles is that they're not always, they can be distinct things that need to happen, but they're not always separate, right? So it's quite possible that the poet is also the composer, that they take the words and they take their own thoughts and they put it to music. In the same sense that the director can also be the singer, in the sense that, if you don't have someone coaching you, for example, and that is the case in art song or chamber music, where you have a soloist and a piano. The singer will often be the director in creating that interpretation and then having that presentation. And there are times where one person can be all four roles at the same time, that they can be the composer and the writer and the performer and the director. Now, an example of that, of course, is going to be for example, a lot of pop music today. I just, a great example is Lady Gaga, right? She is one that's kind of like a person that kind of creates a vision. She takes the lyrics, she takes the music, and she creates this whole entity which becomes that performance and becomes that song. Now, what's important to remember is that with all four of these roles, they come together, and from that is the creation of whatever vocal music that we have. So it's not necessarily any one of these parts is more important than the other, but all of these roles kind of come together. And so when we talk about storytelling and we talk about presenting a story of some sort, we have to think about there's these different elements that all kind of need to be balanced at the same time. That if there's too much emphasis on the words or too much emphasis on the music, it's kind of just like having an unbalanced meal, right? It's not like you are completely hungry, but things just work better when you have each of these elements that kind of work together side by side in creating this presentation. Now, with this concept of the different roles and how they work together in vocal music, right? This could happen, and specifically in a conference like this, where we're talking about telling stories, and especially if we're trying to take a story of our lives and of history. I think back of a recent, and this isn't an opera piece, this is actually a choral piece, but it's a great example. There's a really well-known, if you're in the choral world, he's like the living superstar of the choral world. His name is Eric Whitacre, and he's written a lot of famous pieces. So I just wanted to talk about, he wrote this piece, he composed this piece called The Sacred Veil. And this was, I recently, they had this big conference that I was able to go to, and I was able to view this performance. This is actually written, composed by Eric Whitacre, but it combines the work of this author, this poet named Tony Silvestri. And now he actually told the story. This is it's a story of this poet who had to go through his wife having cancer and passing away. And that story was actually told with snippets of poetry that he wrote, as well as excerpts of like her posts online, as well as a little bit of poetry from the composer as well. This was an example of a piece that was a combination of the poet and the composer working together to tell the story of the last few months of this man's dear wife and their relationship and how it developed, and basically the passing of her life through the veil. So in and you can find that on all over on Spotify, other places like that. And I don't have any attachment to it, so I'm not like plugging it for my sake. But um, the story that it told, it really, I mean, it really touched me, knowing of the story, but then having the words and knowing that the words came from an actual person, came from someone who was going through this experience and through her husband and their relationship there, that it really connected. And then to hear that presented musically was this example of combining these elements. Now, it was a choral piece, so there wasn't much in terms of, interpretation visually. There wasn't much to see there, but the story was still being told in a way, through the music, connecting with the words. That, I mean, I'm a guy, right? We don't like to commit, but I was crying, right? I mean, it really hit somewhere, especially maybe, 2/3 through the piece, where we start approaching death, and we know that it's coming. That music was able to transcend the words, even more than the poetry alone would have done. And so, with that in mind, the other element that is important as a storyteller that I just wanted to touch on, besides considering these roles, and as you're trying to think about how you could tell the story, right? Like I said, maybe you're not a singer, maybe you're not a composer, but maybe maybe you're a writer. So by creating words that can be set to music, you can play a part in that. The same way, the other way is, if you find words that were written, maybe not even necessarily poetry, but just history, words that were written, from someone in the past, whether or not they're related to you, right? Those words can touch you in a way that can, inspire you to then set those to some sort of music. And you don't have to have a degree in composition in order to create music, right? Today there's so many tools that make it very easy for someone to create some sort of music in some sort of level. And again, my background is in classical singing, so that's where I come from. But whether you're writing in a popular genre, or if you're trying to make up your own songs in other, I don't know, maybe you had some sort of techno thing that touches your soul, right? Whatever it is that whatever genre it is that you're trying to jump onto, there's a lot of options out there, and a lot of tools to help maybe non-musicians have an element of that music, or to help you connect with a musician that is able to do that for you. But like I said, since my background is in opera and that form of communication, one other element that I wanted to touch on, which is really important, is, of course, the most important thing I consider for music is to be understood by your audience, right? And that's what we're trying to do. It's important that the words and the music kind of work towards the same goal, or if they're not working towards the same goal, there needs to be a really specific reason that that's not happening. Um, and we'll kind of go into that, once we go through this. But um, that as a, if you don't know, a little bit of definition here: super titles are, if you're in a live performance, super titles are above your head because they're super or sur titles. They sort of translate what you said. Say subtitles are usually in recordings, in videos, things like that, and they're down at the bottom, like right here, right? They fill in to help the audience understand what's going on. And then we'll kind of talk about the difference between subtitles and closed captions, which are similar but a little bit different. So first of all, super titles. If you are working towards having any kind of video recorded show, super titles aren't super important. But if there's any type of live performance that is going to be presented, that is going to be hard to understand for the audience, super titles are a way of presenting the material so that it could be understood. Now, a lot of my background is in opera, and a lot of opera is performed in foreign languages. Italian is very popular, French, German, you'll see quite frequently. But super titles can also be in English, as you can see here in this example. This is actually from Moby Dick, a more recent opera that was written just about a decade ago. And even if it's in English, right, that element of singing can sometimes distort the language in a way that it's difficult to understand. If the language is so hard to understand, like so distorted that you can't understand it.
From my point of view, it's like, why is it vocal music at all, right? Because we talked about that role of words and music combining to create, to create that
feeling and to touch the soul. If you don't know what someone's saying and you can't understand any of their words, you lose a whole layer of understanding. So that's why, when I've done a lot of performing in French, German, Italian, whatever language it is, if it's in a recital setting where you don't have super titles, you will often have, a program with the translated text so that people can read and see what's going on. And if it's in English and it's sung in a way that it's difficult to understand, to kind of put that in perspective, this was a poll from a local classical radio station, kind of basically saying, how often do you use the super titles in an opera? And out of those polled, there was 92% said that they used it either occasionally or a lot to understand what is going on. Because, I mean, honestly, in my opinion, if you go to an opera and you don't understand what they're saying, it's very much the same as just, going to a symphony, which allows you to enjoy beautiful music and to feel the sense of flow that it has going on, but you lose a whole bunch of the drama by not having that. In comparison to what a lot of people do in our world today, is the concept of having subtitles. Now, sort of the difference between subtitles and closed captions are subtle but important. So just having subtitles, those are basically translating the words that are being said to help us understand what's being communicated. Now, in vocal music, that's going to be really important, because if you have a song that's being sung, it could be the most beautiful thing being sung, but the words will sometimes not exactly match up with, the sense of the music. And so knowing that juxtaposition can sometimes be very important. Meaning, like an example being, if you hear a song that's being sung and it sounds light and loose and happy, the text could be, really depressing. And the fact that you have someone pretending that they're happy, but their words are expressing their grief, when you understand how those two layers, like I said, don't go together, that's part of the story just as much as when the words and the music are in the same line of communicating the same message. Now, the slight difference between closed captions is closed captions are for those that can't hear what's going on, and closed captions will also describe the situation as it's happening in the story. And that's what the other picture, rock music continues playing on headphones, right? You wouldn't need subtitles for that. You would want closed captions for that. Now, the reason I pointed out all these ways of having visualizations that help those to understand what they're hearing, or in the case of closed captions, to help those that maybe can't hear at all. Why that's important is because as we're telling stories, we want to be understood. And if there's ever a time where what is being said or sung or presented isn't understood by the audience, you're losing a whole layer of understanding. It's like taking a whole side of your plate of dinner and sort of leaving it in the kitchen. No matter how delicious it is, if you can't eat it, you're missing out on that. A lot of operas used to be performed, 35 years or before. A lot of operas were just translated into English when they were presented. The Metropolitan Opera House, which is the best, the biggest one, the New York one, a lot of their operas were presented in English. Well, 30, 40 years ago, there started to be more of a movement to try to become more authentic. And so they began presenting pieces in their native languages and presenting super titles so that people could understand what was being said. Now, why that is important is because language is part of the way we communicate. And a text set in a specific language is set with those words to match those notes for a specific reason by good composers. Mozart, when he wrote, for German, the cadences, the nuances of the language were written for that German language. When he wrote in Italian, the same thing. The cadence, the way that the language fit with the music was done in a way so that it worked. Now, if you take that same concept and you drop it into English, you can again get a similar feel, but it just doesn't line up right. And anyone that speaks multiple languages knows that concept of how, you know, the languages don't always line up. Emphasis, the importance of certain words, you lose a lot of that when you translate it. And so the reason that this is important is because if you're telling an ancestor story, or someone else that was in a different country, and you take their words and you turn it into English, and then you present that, we still get the feeling of it, but you could quite possibly lose something lost in translation, right? I mean, you can lose some important things as you go through that process. And so sometimes it's worth it, because some people won't connect with the text the same way reading subtitles, right? And the last thing I just wanted to touch on before our time is up is just remember that music, vocal music, is a vehicle to tell the story. The story itself is the driver. And so it's one of the tools to help express and communicate whatever that story may be. Everyone's seen important movies. Google famous movies without music, and you'll see some great clips of the classic triumphant scenes that are just like quiet, and you hear like someone coughing, like it's pretty hilarious. Or I think of Jurassic Park, or those amazing scenes where all the dinosaurs are coming, and you have all the music of these wonderful composers like John Williams and Hans Zimmerman, right? It really, the music sort of takes it to a new level. When you take that away, you're left with just sort of really awkward silences. In this sense, music and the vocal music, and that's a vehicle to take us to where we're going. Or if not, we don't want it to veer us away. So if our story is here, we don't want the music to distract us and take us in this direction. So finding a way of having the music complement whatever story we're trying to tell is how we're going to get there.
What I love what you said is, as we tell stories, we want to be understood, and that's the key component in our crafting a better story. What's our role in the story, and then how can we tell it so that somebody else can understand? What role do you play in storytelling to help your children come to know maybe more about your life or the life of your loved ones?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to helping them understand what's going on, so that then they can connect on other levels. A great example, there's a very classic art song. It's German lieder, like I mentioned. It's called Der Erkeling, which is the Elf King, and it's composed by Schubert, and it tells a story of a father and his son, as his son is like dying, and he's like trying to carry him through the woods on a horseback, and the Elf King keeps calling the son away, and and the father's running through the night, and he finally arrives he arrives at his destination, and his son has died. The Elf King has called him away. So we told the kids the story, and then we had them listen to the song, and they were able to connect with that song on a different level, because they understood what was happening, even though they didn't speak German and they didn't understand what was going on. The music was able to tell the story in a way that they were able to understand. Now, in a similar sense, I mean, that's an example with a piece of history, this art song. But in our own family, right, as someone that's Polynesian, finding ways of connecting with family stories of hearing the times when when they love hearing the stories of how they were born. Our kids, my wife has made them sort of a memory book with pictures, and my wife was really good about recording each of their birth stories, and so they love hearing about and they don't remember the whole thing, but they'll remember, oh, I was born really fast at the hospital, that type of thing. As well as using, for example, music as a Polynesian, being Tongan American like I am, I play the ukulele. It's kind of one of the staples. If you're brown skinned, you really should be playing the ukulele at some point. But but we'll play songs and pearly shells and the Hawaiian wedding song, and have ways of having the kids kind of connect a little bit with their heritage and their history through the music, even if they don't quite understand what all the words mean. Is the other level of things. Even if the kids don't understand the words, music can help give them a way of connecting with the stories. If they don't understand them now as young kids, they just like the music. As they grow older, we've built a foundation that will help them connect with the stories as they learn them later in life.
I love that. And I'd like to ask you a personal question. Your sister lost her son not too long ago, your nephew. And I remember that you recorded a beautiful moment in history. Why did it move so many people so powerfully? Because that's why we tell stories, is to connect. And so how is she able to connect not only with her child that left, but with every single person that has heard or seen that video?
Yeah, so my older sister Falena, her son Jordan, passed away drowned at a swimming pool at the age of 6. This happened a few years back, and obviously, the worst thing as a parent that you can have to experience is having a child pass away. There was a lot going on in the family at that time, and the moment that was captured was at the funeral, at the family service. And in Polynesian culture, there's a larger family service where each of the family parts of the family will get up and present and kind of speak, kind of open mic style. Family services can take several hours. And then in addition to that, they'll have the bishop service, which is more of a traditional funeral memorial service, that you would have normal speakers at. As the final speakers of the family service, my sister spoke about the importance of family, and then she presented a hula, and in that hula expressed a final kiss goodbye. And that song, it's a beautiful song. It spoke because of the words in the song, but the movement of the dance and its combination with the situation that was going on. Yeah, it's been viewed over a million times on YouTube because saying goodbye in mortality is difficult for anyone on any level, but even more so to a mother, saying goodbye to a young child. And her composure in being able to do that. Now, knowing my sister, she has shed so many tears over that, but at that moment she was able to, as a performer and with years of dance and hula type experience, was able to express those emotions through her movements that connected with the music in order to give those feelings of peace and comfort that you don't always get in this life. It's been a few years and it's still very difficult, in our family, saying goodbye to Jordan. But having a song like that and having it connect with so many people just speaks to the power of sort of a sameness that we all have, love and connection that transcends language and transcends cultures and barriers, right? Most of the people that watch that probably aren't Polynesian, and probably don't know all the context of what was going on in there. But they were able to see that and feel that in that moment. And my sister's words as well, of speaking comfort and peace are instrumental in that concept of uniting and connecting in love.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Daniel. I love it at Christmas time when all your kids got on there and they were all singing, and you could see the joy in their face, and they're connecting to you, and they'll always remember their father after you've long passed. They will remember you for your stories, for your love through music. And some of them will probably grow up to be just like you and be musicians and have the love of the language of music. And so thank you so much for sharing that. Daniel, if our audience wants to connect with you online, what's the best place that they can reach you?
With a last name like Tuutau, it's super hard to spell. I always say it's like Schwarzenegger. It's catchy to say, but hard to spell. So to find me really easily, I like to sing. So you can find me at singingdaniel.com. We also, my wife and I have a small production company where we help with online streaming as well as local videography and those types of things. But the best way to find me is just right there at singingdaniel.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. Appreciate your time and sharing all of your knowledge with us. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.